this is the human brain, and it's around 3 pounds of jello. So it's soft. It's like hard jello. And it is the most vascular rich organ in the body. What does that mean? The vascular system comprises of the blood vessels, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries. If you pull apart all of the blood vessels or all of the vasculature in the brain, it spans 400 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have 400 miles of these beautiful little highways infiltrating the brain and delivering the brain with oxygen and nutrients via blood.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Everforward Radio. I'm here with one of my favorite people in the world, but also a three-peat guest on the show to dive into one of my favorite categories of overall wellness optimization, and that's brain health. So, Louisa, welcome back.
I am so excited to be here.
Yeah.
It's third time's a charm. Actually, it's been one a year.
I was going to say now, because technically we're in 2023, just barely.
Yeah, but we did. Oh, maybe we skipped 2021. Or maybe it was 21, 22, and 23.
I think you're right. You're right. So much has happened in my world in understanding of the brain, neuroscience, and neurophysiology. A lot thanks in part to getting to know you more and the work that you put out and the content and everything. So I'm curious, what is so unique now in your space? What are you finding out? What is the angle of neuroscience that we're here to talk about most?
Well, I'm super excited because so much has changed in my life too, because I've just finished up my studies in neurophysiology medicine with a major in neurophysiology, which was very daunting, but my God, I learned so much. So neurophysiology, as you know, is a subspecialty of neurology. So you learn more so things such as an EMG or a nerve conduction study, or an EEG. So you really learn how to use these three things to pick up on dysfunctions in the brain or nervous system. So you'd see neurophysiologists for multiple sclerosis, for example, or myasthenia gravis. So these are these demyelinating neurodegenerative
diseases.
And so when I say
like ALS, we've talked about in the past with my father,
ALS is and in Australia we call it motor neurons disease, but that is one of them.
Motor neurons disease?
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
So so in the UK and in Australia, in the Commonwealth, it's motor neurons disease. Here in America, it's Lou Gehrig's or ALS.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig, one of the most iconic baseball players, athletes, early American history, one of the most famous people to unfortunately get diagnosed and pass away from it,
And really hard to pick up on ALS and motor neurons disease. I mean, it's just, there's just so many facets, which I now know about. It's like, there's just so many things that you need to be taking into place. But so that's what I've been up to. And obviously coupling that with my true passion, which is elite athleticism, it's really marrying the two. It's like, how can we marry elite athletes or even athletes, let's just not say elite athletes, and neurophysiology? And it turns out that obviously I'm still on the same path. So still finding new and exciting ways to help my athletes perform better.
So for the person listening right now, watching, or even myself right now, when I hear the word athlete, I've always kind of struggled with that term, especially if I'm about to learn something, because I think, well, I'm not an athlete. A lot of times I think athlete, and I think most people think athlete as someone that is playing a sport professionally, or you're just that avid about it that you do it like to the nth degree. Maybe someone who goes like to the CrossFit games or something. But we're like, help us kind of like walk us off the ledge of that term of athlete so that we can really grab hold of these concepts. Because if day in, day out, we're taking care of our bodies, if we're training, if we're going to the gym, yoga, at home calisthenics, whatever, like that's a form of athleticism, right? Like continuously taking care of the physical self.
Yeah. And I love that. That was where the birth of Neuro Athletics come from, because you have to be your own athlete. We used to say 10 years ago, the things that were reserved for athletes, and I was an athlete. I was a triathlete. I raced for Australia. I used to do, this was, I wouldn't say 20 years ago. I would say 12 years ago, easy. I was doing ice baths back before anybody was really, now everyone.
How long ago?
Oh my gosh.
Over a decade?
2009.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was way before I ever heard about it in the form that we hear about it now.
Yeah. And we didn't know about what it was doing to us in terms of the brain. Our coach would throw us in there and just say,
ice the muscles, relax.
And it was traumatizing. So, but I loved
Still
it.
Is.
And so, we were doing, and so that was just reserved for us as athletes. And then everything else, like we were getting cupping, we were getting massage, like this was all just reserved for elite athletes. And I used to think to myself, when I retired in 2012 from triathlon, I used to think, why isn't everybody treating their bodies like elite athletes? Because if they did, they'd probably be able to perform better in their field. Take a salesperson, for example, because I do a lot of workshops with salespeople. And one of the biggest things that a sales manager will say is, how can we get our sales people to perform better? And I'm like, well, treat them like athletes. So that's, we go out and we do workshops, and it's literally called Perform Like an Athlete, an operating manual to human performance. And imagine if you are in sales and you treat sales as if that is your sport. But the competition is when you're making the phone calls. So you have to be ready. You have to be primed in everything, how you sit, how you speak, how you deliver the information, how you receive the information, what you answer back. To be able to do that, you have to be at your peak. So why not get them to be doing their morning routines, doing their afternoon routines, doing their journaling, things that are not sales script,
right?
Things that are not in line with your actual job description. Treat them like athletes, and it will show when they're doing their sales calls.
So for the everyday athlete, like I would consider myself someone that just, like I said earlier, I prioritize taking care of my physical self through long walks, through general daily physical activity, through strength training, yoga. I think that about covers everything.
Yeah.
For me to want to think about myself as an athlete, what's that framework? And then why is that important? Like what kind of ROIs would I see with that new framework?
Well, when we look at the athlete's pathway, when you go through and you learn how to coach an athlete, you look at these pillars of sport. There's tactics, like what is the tactics of that sport? Then there's the technical side. Then there's the sports psychology side. Then there's the nutrition, and then there's the strength. These are all pillars that they look at to make up an athlete. So if you base your life on those pillars, the ROI is exponential. And
pretty solid pillars.
And can I just say that you are living in that 1% population. You are doing much better, in my opinion, because you have to take, when we look at America and there's 220 million people, you are treating your body like that, and you are at that 1% population who is doing well. You have a wonderful career. You have it shows you actually, you do take your shirt off and you put up photos of yourself on Instagram. Maybe they're progress shots, which is great. So we can see the progress. You feel good. You're energized. You're happy, I think.
I'm very happy.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And you look great.
Thank you.
And you're doing this all without illicit drugs, which is good. Because
absolutely. And it's, I mean, in a way, I guess I do treat my life, and I definitely, when you kind of break down those habits, I and many people like myself, the listeners of the show, we do really have these athletic protocols. We do have these high performance athlete habits that we don't really think about, because we're just trying to make quality habits and improve the quality of our life for us, just who we are. Chase, John, Tom, Harry, Sally, whatever. It's like I receive that, I guess, basically. It's cool to kind of get that feedback from someone who is the professional, because I think ultimately that's what we're after, to get this kind of validation and reassurance that I'm not just doing something for the sake of doing something. It's founded in a lot of scientific application that we've seen work in the past, but only, to your point, in select groups.
Yeah, and then you look at an NBA player, they have to perform at their peak because they have to play well. Yeah. But we're all playing some game, whether you're a mother. I think that, and one day I will be, and that will be my competition. Right now I'm in LA, and I'm staying with my cousin who has a newborn. Newborn, she's 9 months, and her room is next to mine, and I'm just seeing what you have to go through as a new parent. She's crying all night. They're sleep training her, then she's up, and she just wants to be held. And I'm like, this is a sport. This is a sport.
That's so true. I mean, life is a sport.
Yeah.
Life is a sport.
And so if you have the opportunity through education, through things such as your podcast and other forms of education, free education online, you can be the best performing version of yourself.
I agree. So neuroscience, at least in my world, has become a lot more popular.
It has, I know.
Thanks. We were talking earlier about Andrew Huberman, like his work and his podcast that's just like blown up, Huberman Lab. And it has kind of, I think, shined a light on some unique areas of the human experience, really through the lens of science, through the lens of neuroscience. Hey, here's like maybe why you're experiencing this, why, you're having success there, or how to just better understand the brain in particular to better apply it to bodily functions, bodily movements. So through the lens of we'll say, exercise and fitness, what are you seeing maybe that has become popular or has become like top of mind for a lot of people in the world of neuroscience for the application of exercise?
Well, I think to your point, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about the brain. I was walking out and I was trying to consult. I was literally trying to tell athletic teams we need to be focusing on the brain, and they're like, "You're an idiot." They're like, "No, we need to just get them stronger."
Yeah.
And so I am so happy to see that more people are taking the brain into consideration. And when we look at the brain and we think about how can it be performing at its peak, we think of, well, sleep. We need to be sleeping well. We need to be eating well, so nutrition. But then there's this element over here, which is exercise. And so I love that we'll get into the benefits of exercise on the brain, but I love that we are now living in a culture where exercise is sexy. People are going to the gym. I remember when I first moved here, it was 2016, 2017. Rumble was big.
Oh, yeah.
Rumble was huge. And I did a workshop with all the Rumble trainers.
A boxing workout class.
Yeah. I don't think it's as big as what it used to be, but back then it was sexy to go to the gym. I'm like, this is great because we need it, because people need to be exercising. Yeah. So any type of new fad, if it's going to get you moving, I'm in for it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people get going, particularly when it comes to exercise, they get going in maybe a new workout class or even, air quote here, a fad training style because it's popular. But that's a good thing, right? If we get people exercising, that's great. But what I love that happens for most people, unless you actually choose to do a deep dive and study, what's actually going on during exercise, is that we get a lot of these kind of reverse engineered effects. I'm hardcore in my Pilates training or Rumble, and I get all these physical benefits, but we both know there are a lot of other benefits happening, particularly upstairs in the brain. So what are some things maybe that the person might not realize, or some secondary, tertiary benefits to physical fitness that their brain is experiencing that I had no idea. So that might be like, a way to kind of stay more adherent because you're realizing there are more benefits.
Yeah. You just brought up a good thing. People do get into things and maybe they quit. I have done that. I get excited when a new yoga studio opens and I'll do 2 sessions and then I've gone. The thing, when it comes to the brain, it doesn't really matter what you're doing, whether you're cycling, whether you're running, whether you're doing, you just have to be moving at a certain rate to get the brain benefits.
So like all exercise matters for brain health, basically.
Yes, all exercise matters. And we'll go into the 3 modalities. So first and foremost, we've got, if you are watching on YouTube.
Which you should be. Everybody, check out the video, subscribe, like, comment, all the cool things. She brought a prop. We got a brain, everybody.
You should be watching on YouTube for several reasons, because I have brought a beautiful model of the brain. So this is the human brain, and it's around 3 pounds of jello. So it's soft. It's like hard jello. And it is the most vascular rich organ in the body. What does that mean? The vascular system comprises of the blood vessels, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries. If you pull apart all of the blood vessels or all of the vasculature in the brain, it spans 400 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, so you have 400 miles of these beautiful little highways infiltrating the brain and delivering the brain with oxygen and nutrients via blood. Wow. So that's what we need to know. And this enables you to do things such as think, process information, focus. In fact, as we get older, the biggest thing that deteriorates is focus. Now, I'm going to draw your attention if you're still watching. If not, I'll describe it. I'm touching the front of the brain, which is located behind your forehead, okay? And it's called the frontal lobe. And this is the latest guy to the party. This is the biggest and most, in my opinion, most important fact when it comes to cognition, because this is where the frontal lobe houses the prefrontal cortex. And this is where all of the cognitive functions live.
That's the area of the most recent evolution to human beings, right?
Correct,
Right.
yeah. And the last guy to the party, I say.
Yeah.
And this guy he's excited because he's got thinking in there. He's got processing information, your ability to decide, attention. They all live there. And the reason why it's so important is it's not just the biggest part of the brain in terms of size. It houses the most amount of neurons.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So let me.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. You're kind of like expanding on what you're saying. I mean, it would have to have the most amount.
Yeah. Now, take this. The brain has 87 billion neurons. However, every neuron has between 15,000 to 30,000 connections. So, yeah, it's no wonder why it's taking up 20% of our total expenditure.
Wow. That's like an infinite amount of connections that the brain can be making at any time.
I think it's like 10 to the power of, actually, don't quote me. I don't want to mess that up.
10 to the, I'll
10
say,
to the
I'll
power
be an
of
idiot.
something.
10 to the power
50,
of a big number.
Yeah. I will
Wow.
figure that out. But what I'm saying is there's so much happening in it. And we can improve the connections between these neurons through exercise. And there's 3 real different forms of exercise that we can do. We can do aerobic, which is long bouts of exercise. We know that. Cardiovascular fitness exercise.
Requiring oxygen during the process, yeah.
We can do resistance training, which is weight-bearing exercises with actual weights. And then we can do what I like to call Neuro Athletics, which is literally things such as hand-eye coordination, memory, thinking tasks, decision-making tasks, etc. And that's primarily what we do with our athletes, because we don't go in and fix the body. We are literally neck up, we say.
Yeah, that's right.
So how does exercise help the brain? Well, for starters, on the outside of the brain is the cortex, and that is the gray matter. We have both gray and white matter, and the gray matter houses the cell bodies. So if you look at do you remember back in high school biology, you'd look at a cell and it would be there was a cell body, it's a round thing, inside holds its organelles.
Oh, I got a book for you. Right now I'm reading this book, The Song of the Cell, all about cellular biology by Dr. Siddhartha, I forget his last name. I'm nerding out so hard. The way sorry, I digress. It's
I want to
written
read
like a novel. It's written so beautifully, but he's a medical doctor. The Song of the Cell. You got to check it out.
I'm so happy you said that
All
because
the
I just
cell
bought a
stuff is like
Kindle.
top of mind for me.
I just bought a Kindle and I haven't used it yet.
Get The Song of the Cell.
I'm getting it. That's going to be my first one. So there's the cell. Okay, now the cells in our body are designed like that, but the cells in our brain are a bit different. They have axons. So there's the cell body, and that is the gray matter. It's just here on the top of the head or on the top of the brain, and that's what makes up the gray matter. Now the white matter is the axon, which comes off of the cell body and then connects with dendrites to other cells. That houses the white matter because the white matter is made up of these myelin sheets, and they wrap around the axon, and that's how we process information. So when we exercise, when we're doing aerobic training, we are helping both grow the gray matter of our brain, so we can get growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, which is the memory structure of the brain. But then we can also get better connectivity between existing neurons, so we can help with the white matter of the brain. So it's a really beautiful process. And one thing that I also want to point out is when you are exercising, doesn't matter what you're doing, that we have to differentiate, though, between exercise and physical activity.
Yes.
Now, I just got back. I talk about this all the time when I'm with my parents. We fight in terms of I make them exercise and they yell at me. They bring up their age first and foremost. And I'm like, don't say that. And they like, Louisa, I was gardening and I was walking around, and Louisa, I'm doing the washing. That's physical activity. Now, the guidelines suggest that, and this is the American Academy of Physical Activity, suggests that anything over a structured regime over 5 minutes to the point where you can't finish a sentence is considered exercise. So physical activity isn't just physical activity is just walking around the house, but that's we're not talking about physical activity and brain health. We're talking about exercise and brain health. So when you are exercising, what are we doing? We are transferring blood to the brain. We're getting a flush, a profusion of blood to the brain, delivers oxygen and nutrients. What we're also getting is we're getting a release of BDNF. And I know you love BDNF. You bring this up.
I'm drinking it right now, brain-derived neurofactor,
Yeah, brain-derived neurotropic factor.
Excuse me, yeah. It's a neurofactor in strong coffee.
Yeah, and that's what we're drinking now, which is great. So it is a growth factor for the brain. So it helps the growth of the connections of neurons, but also the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus.
Wow.
So until recently, and I don't know if I brought this up in another podcast, we've only just started to jump on board with the role that resistance training plays in the brain. And oh my God, it's just unbelievable. The effects that a resistance training have on the brain, in my opinion, far outweigh the effects of aerobic activity.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's great for me because I'm team strength training all day, and it's like the story of my life. Should always do more cardio, but that's
cardio is good
great.
though.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like same but different. It serves other purposes for physical health as well.
Well, yeah. When you're doing cardio or VO2 max base training, you are doing what we call in exercise physiology cardiac remodeling. So you're training the chambers of your heart and the musculature of your heart to withstand more pressure, which is great. But when we do resistance training, my gosh, so many beautiful things happen. You think of your bicep, for example. When it contracts, it shortens. And what happens is your muscle, your skeletal muscle releases different things. It releases these myokines. Okay. Now, a myokine is a muscle-based protein, and it gets released from the belly of the muscle, or actually from anywhere in the muscle, and it shoots into the bloodstream, and then that goes up and connects to different receptors in our brain, on our liver, on our kidneys. We have these little receptors for myokines on every organ in the body, even the heart. So when they're released from the muscle, they have an effect in a positive way on the brain structurally.
Wow.
Okay, so it can grow. So structure is like the shape and the size. So it can grow the size of it, but also functionally. So it can help with our frontal lobe decision-making, cognitive performance. And there's been a wonderful meta-analysis where they got MCI patients, so mild cognitive impairment, which is a pre-dementia state. They got them to exercise for 6 months.
Like reduced overall brain function or signs of reduced brain function?
Yeah, memory, et cetera, and more so long-term memory. So they got that, and they slowed down and reversed the mild cognitive impairment through exercise alone. So the profound benefits of weight training and aerobic activity is just unbelievable. So for anybody who's not doing it, you should.
You bring up something else, or I remembered something else as you were talking about structure versus function. A few years ago, we had a guest on, Tracy Dews, who is a hydration expert. She's got a PhD, I think, in some kind of neuro quantum something. But anyway, she was sharing this incredible knowledge about hydration and how sometimes, we might, drinking more water for most people could be a positive thing. But sometimes for those people, or for all people, increasing the quality of the structure of the water you're drinking through like fully structured water molecules, whether that's, getting like I forget the device, but something that kind of like restructures the water molecule. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So it's sometimes it's like we can work smarter, not harder. Like we can get by, or we can have a higher increase in the goal that we're after by just increasing the quality of the process that we're doing. So she was like, you can actually become much more hydrated and stay more hydrated at the cellular level by increasing the amount of fully structured water molecules you have coming into your body instead of just flooding your body with more and more and more water. So my question for you is, when it comes to our brain health, function, cognition, maybe even particularly through training, is there a way to focus on the shape of these brain cells and neurons, like to increase like the structure of it so that it then increases the function and capabilities that it has, or they both kind of go hand in hand?
No. So when I say, it's almost better to not focus on neurogenesis, which is the creation of new neurons and structure, and more so really focus on the importance of the connection between existing neurons.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you just brought up, and I just wanted to point this out.
So now we talked about neurogenesis last time. You, pun intended, literally blew my mind about something that I believe to be true about neurogenesis, and you kind of were like, actually, go back, check the literature.
Yeah. You were under the assumption that neurogenesis occurs.
Right.
We could
in
just
human
grow
beings,
new
we
neurons.
can stimulate neurogenesis. Yeah.
Yeah. Growing new neurons. And that's pretty much, and the answer is no, but we can do it in the hippocampus. And that's great still, because you think as you get older, that's the first thing that goes. At the age of 30, your brain starts to atrophy.
Wow.
Yeah. But here's a wild fact. Now, we talk about dementia. Dementia is a neurodegenerative disease that is affecting tens of millions of people worldwide. That's the umbrella term. It's used for things such as Lewy body dementia, vascular dementia, and Alzheimer's disease. And the predominant form of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, is the biggest one out of all of them. So everyone's scared of Alzheimer's disease. It turns out that you're in control of 90% of the current cases of dementia is the non-genetic form.
Really? That's good news.
That's very good news. It means you have control. You have the lifestyle interventions means that you have control over stroke, over cardiovascular disease, and over dementia, or over I won't say dementia. I'll say Alzheimer's disease, because the genes that are responsible for Alzheimer's disease, they may well and truly, just say you test positive for ApoE4. You've got 4 and 4. Even so, there are certain areas in the world where some people do have, the E4 and E4, 2 copies, but they never get Alzheimer's disease.
I think, was this what kind of popped up recently with Chris Hemsworth? Are you aware of all this?
Yeah.
In that show Limitless.
Yeah.
He kind of like...
He's got E4, I think.
That's right. So like, hey, genetically, you have a higher predisposition of potentially getting Alzheimer's. It kind of like threw everybody into...
But he doesn't have to.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because your genes are not your destiny. So if you are embodying a lifestyle that consists of proper sleep, my sleep is so important, especially when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases. Exercise, if you are consistently exercising at a bare minimum of 20 minutes a day, 4 times a week, and you're having proper nutrition, then you can be ahead of the mark, and you don't have to be part of that 3%. Because really, 3% of the Alzheimer's disease patients are the ones with the genetic forms. And look, there are some, like the Huntington's genes, for example. If you're on chromosome 4, if you do have that mutation, you will get Huntington's disease. But for the vast majority of Alzheimer's disease patients, you can slow the progression of or reverse it in some cases. So we have to talk about these interventions and be really smart about it.
Talk about them, but also, which is going to lead me to my question, like, what can we do to kind of get this type of preventive information and testing beyond just becoming more curious about neuroscience and brain health? Personally, the last couple of years, I've done a couple things. I found some, the team over at Wave Neuro, Dr. Eric Wan. I recently went back. Oddly enough, I didn't plan this. I had no idea. 1 year to the day of my first test, I went back for a second brain scan, and it was. I wish I had the information now to share with you. I'll send you the PDF later. But it was wild for me to get this information. Luckily, knock on wood, my brain's great. It's performing very well. All different waves, from the front to the back of the house are talking independently, but also symmetrically. But I could see how someone getting a brain health scan, like at Wave Neuro, or even going to EEG, sometimes knowledge for us is power, but knowledge is fear. And we can go step on the scale, and that's basic preliminary information that can motivate us or can scare us. We can go get basic metabolic labs at our doctor, at our annual physical. We can do certain things now. We don't have to be this high-performing athlete. We can go maybe see someone like yourself or, ask for certain scans to get this kind of information.
Literally how well your brain is functioning.
Right, yeah. And so I guess what are some things, is it as simple as, the common everyday person going to talk to their doctor, hey, I want to get a brain scan. I want to learn what's going on upstairs so that I can, get ahead of it. But then also with this new information, we don't have to be scared, because when we maybe see certain markers, we used to think, oh, this is going to mean bad news. But a big part of this science you're sharing now is it's actually in our control. We just need to know where we stand, and so then we can take the proper course of action.
Yeah, you can go and do certain brain checks, but here's the thing. Most doctors, GPs will lobby against that and say you don't need it. You're not over the age of 60. And
you
that's
haven't
the
had
biggest
a TBI.
You haven't had a TBI.
Symptomatic, yeah.
Exactly. Only if you've got chronic migraines, which I think the classification is if you've got, in Australia, if you've had 5 days of consistent migraines, you do qualify for an MRI. I don't know what it's like in America, but
5 days in a year or
no, consistently.
Consistently, okay.
Because then that could, if you don't get an MRI, it could turn out to be something detrimental.
True,
yeah. But start to assess yourself. And just know that your brain is always either in thrive mode or in damage control. And a lot of us are walking around in damage control mode because the brain is there just to keep it functioning. It's only there to make you survive. Evolutionarily, your brain, it wasn't meant to survive past the age of 40, which is past the age of reproduction.
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that we are living past that and thriving, and that's where I want my parents to be. I'm like, you can thrive at 80 and 90, and they think I'm crazy. I'm like, it can happen, but it's a deliberate effort. It doesn't just happen by chance. So here's something that's interesting. Back to the blood vessels. The number one thing that is controllable, but can also collapse these tiny little capillaries and vessels in the brain that are just one cell thick, is blood pressure, or consistently high blood pressure. So hypertension, which I just realized many people are checking their blood pressure once a year at their physical.
Not any of you.
Do you check your blood pressure?
I do, yeah.
How often?
I would say probably 2022, I personally checked it at home, I'd say 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. I have a blood pressure cuff at home, more so for my father, and this was back when I was in Australia. So I was measuring as well, and I even found out odd things. Well, not odd things. Mine is lower than 120/80, which is the gold standard, but it's great. And so it's interesting for me. But for my dad, we have a chart now. We check it every single day because he had a stroke back in 2019. So now I've got them checking it, because what you can pick up on is patterns, and consistently high blood pressure just collapses the vessels in the brain. So what happens when they collapse? Well, if you're not getting blood flow to a certain area in the brain, that area is going to die off. And every part of the brain is responsible for something different in the body. So you want to be able, you want to just keep pushing. That's what I think it's about. I think brain health is actually about vascular health. You want to be pushing blood towards the brain. And we've got 2 main arteries that shoot out from the heart. So we've got the carotid arteries and the vertebral arteries. And they're the 2 main arteries. So
you guys can probably see mine is always throbbing right up here.
Yeah. And so we need to be doing as much as we can just to pump the blood up. But I just wanted to point out, when you were talking to me about the structured water, I was looking into hyperbaric oxygen chambers. Turns out they're like $500,000.
Oh, to get one.
I was like, maybe I'll just get one for my dad, right?
Yeah.
But that too is delivering 100% oxygen. How amazing would that be if we could just live in one?
There's something to it there. It's funny you mentioned that. I see them at a lot of wellness, restorative optimization places, like Remedy Place, for example. I think I shared with you them.
I wanted to go there.
Fantastic. They're here in LA. They just opened up one in New York City.
Yeah.
They've got, it's where I go for a lot of like aerosana, cold plunge. They have hyperbaric chambers.
They got the hyperbaric there.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
It's great too for jet lag as well.
That's what I need.
Which is like, not to go off on a tangent, but jet lag for me, I was sharing with you earlier, jet lag for me has been a big new focus because I've done a lot of travel, cross country, international. And so really trying to understand what is going on with jet lag. I learned through, actually by the time this is live, this will have gone out with Andrew Herr from Fountain Fly Kit. It's really triggered most by an inflammation in the brain and a lack of nutrients, electrolytes, hydration.
And a lack of sleep.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is why I love what I do here now, because I'm kind of like pushing together these two worlds of what he was sharing and what you're sharing, his explanation of like really if we can bring a lot of things like key hydration, like key electrolytes, and particularly like omega-3s, fatty acids to feed the brain, and at certain timing, depending on where you are, sugar, actually glucose, to kind of helps, re-spark a new circadian rhythm in your new time zone. But then also it makes sense with the hyperbaric aspect of adding in pure oxygen, pure O2. Because if what you've been saying is basically just like this vascular system is really how our brain is going to survive and thrive if we can feed it just that pure O2 to keep that vascular system running strong. I mean, that's great for jet lag, but also who doesn't want that in their everyday life?
Yeah. So there was I get asked often as well, well, Louisa, what's the best type of exercise? And I always say, well, you need to we know
the one
it's
you're
a combination. No, it's a combination of strength, resistance,
okay. So
strength training.
The old just general health coach in me is always going to say the one you're going to keep doing.
Well,
but
yes, because
a layer deeper.
There is an adherence to adherence is the hardest thing for anybody. It's hard if I'm like, okay, I want to get on a specific, it's adherence. Okay. So adherence is hard. Yes. But when we're looking deep into the layers of which is the best exercise, it showed that leg strength and, muscle mass in the lower extremities was all round better for brain health. And the way I see that and I conclude that is because if we have, it's bigger muscles, first of all.
Our largest muscles.
Yeah. And there is more cell bodies in there, evidently. And it can help with glucose disposal. So that's one thing which can help with, because diabetes is a risk factor for some of these neurocognitive diseases. But then there's also your veins. Now, your veins are just a one direction pump. So they can't pump by themselves. So you need to, when you're doing these leg exercises, which are big muscles, what are they doing? They're pumping the veins. What happens then? The blood in the veins go up into the heart, into the vena cava, then go up, boom, into the head. So you're doing a lot by doing leg exercises. And it happens, obviously, your veins are smaller in different, so you got to think about it like that. And that's my new thing, vascular health, because I think I was focusing a lot in 2021 and 2022 on morphology and the structure and neurons. But in the last 6 months at university, we were just learning so much about the vascular system, and it's just been proliferated into my brain. So, and over the next 2 years, I am still doing a doctorate, and I'm focusing on myokines. So the muscle-based protein, and there's 600 to date myokines that are released. 600.
Wow.
600.
That's fascinating to me. It just blows my mind how much when we learn something about the body, especially when it comes to exercise, there's just all the surface level stuff that I can choose to manipulate what I do with my body and ultimately how it looks and performs. But then all these other things going on, it's just like it's never ending. We think we figure out, we exercise and this happens, but then like, well, why does this happen? This happens because of this other thing. This other thing is fed by this other thing, whether it's a process, whether it's a system or a fuel source. Like through oxygen, through water, through electrolytes, all these things just have to work synergistically in order to not only get, I think, the most optimized results we're after, but as a human being, just the whole longevity aspect. And longevity for me is kind of like my main thing right now.
Is it? And I think with longevity, it's not who can live to 100. It is how do you want to spend the last 10 years of your life? Even if you are, let's just say You have been given a plan and it says you'll be here until 100.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to spend those last 10 years in bed, crippled and not being able to remember or communicate with anyone? Or do you want to be able to spend it talking to someone?